Sounds True presents recordings from the Alan Watts Archive. We continue with an introduction to meditation practice and various guided meditations compiled from recordings of Alan Watts. And now, the art of meditation.
I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, he said, I know that without me, God could not live for one moment. And this is the other aspect of it. And this is the difficult one to understand. And we shall be able to approach this in the course of the seminar. In fact, if you realize that, then you've really got it. You've got the point of your own existence. But to get the reverse picture, you have first of all to get clearly its opposite one, namely that the existence of any one minute little thing is intimately related to everything. And then what happens when you clearly understand that, and you've really got that, your mind does a flip, like that. You know, it's like when you squeeze the air into in a sausage balloon, and you get all the air squeezed out, you think, into one end of the balloon, and suddenly it goes bloop, and it comes out the other end, you see? Well, it's sort of like that. And you have to be very careful at that point not to go crazy. But because you see, when you find out that all this universe depends on you, some people get frightened, others get cocky, and from both things disasters can follow. You have to discover that and then be natural. Act as if nothing happened. See, supposing we all touch each other, and then somebody says boo, we'll all jump a little bit together. And if you examine any one jump carefully enough, any one individual jumping, you will see, if you can find out enough about it, that the way he did it was in response to the ones next to him, and they did it in response to the ones next to them, and they jumped so far because they couldn't push any further, and some were a little bit pulled in their jump, and so on. And by seeing exactly what one of them did, you could reconstruct what all of them were doing. Only usually we don't bother to think about things like that, because it takes too long. And this is one of our great difficulties as human beings, that the mode of thinking upon which we largely rely for our practical calculations is unbelievably clumsy, because it can only deal with what. But we do the most beautiful things that we do really by that means, because all that thought and intellectuality can do is it can embellish your natural talents. A lot of people who are incredibly good at thinking never do anything creative because they have no talent available. They may have it, but they don't know, they don't trust it, they don't know how to make use of it, and therefore their intellect works to little purpose. because the in function of the intellect is to be the servant of the organic intelligence. You see? Only what we're doing is we're trying to make the intellect the master. The intellect is a wonderful servant, just so long as it knows its place. But once it becomes saying to nature, look, you submit, I know how you ought to be right. And I'm going to take charge. That is the moment of hybris, where Adam eats the fruit of the tree of knowledge, that is to say, of technical knowledge, and tries to be God to the world. And God says, okay, baby, you try. Then you see you've got to work. That's why the curse of eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge was work. Everything became work. Cats, dogs and birds, they don't do any work. It's true, they scurry around getting food, but that's what there is to do. That's fun. That's life. That's living. It's not work. Besides, you don't have to think about it. You have your brain tells you where to look for it. Your nose tells you where to find it. You do what comes naturally, and there it is. And if God so clothed the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, faithless ones? But I never met a minister who would not comment upon that is a very impractical passage which we can't live up to. But to get back to space, all I was showing in this sort of digression was that our mind, our self, is not inside our heads, but extends. And so you see, you have as the great vehicle of this extension of the universe, you have space. And you see immediately that you cannot pin space down. You cannot really conceive space at all. Look at the wonder a child has when it asks questions and begins. What's up there? What's beyond? What's after that? What's after that? The child is absolutely fascinated by thinking about that. Do you know all children are fascinated with infinity? Don't you remember seeing, say, a child's book? And on the cover of this book is a little girl sitting, reading the same book, with the same little girl on the cover. And so naturally, there's another little girl on the cover of the book she's looking at in the picture. And so the child begins to wonder, how small can it get? How far can it go? Or they get in opposing mirrors and look. And gee, that's wonderful. Why can't you line them up so that it doesn't just disappear around the corner always? Couldn't you get in straight on this? Seems so difficult. Mummy, what did God do before he started the world? Think back. What would it be like to be in heaven and live forever and ever and ever and ever? And immediately this somehow stretches the skull. And children love doing this because children are always trying out experiments on themselves. You know, they prod themselves, pull themselves. They love to spin in circles and make themselves feel dizzy. Because that's a great thing, you know, that feeling of really going like this, you see. They're always fascinated with the limits of experience. So what's out beyond that? Because now when a sophisticated astronomer tries to tell you that space is finite, we resent this and say, all right, space is finite, but what's outside it? Well, the astronomer says, you see, you can only talk about an outside, inside space. Outside space, there is no outside. You see, the mind won't take it. The sense, you see, of infinity. So, this space fascinates us. Going on forever. Expanding. It seems to be actually going on forever. See? If the universe is a huge explosion. But you can see, can't you, I think this. Space, although you cannot pin it down, and has the quality of infinity, there's no way of talking about space, because it has no color, it has no weight, you can't cut it, you can't possibly chop it into pieces. And yet, at the same time, you cannot differentiate it from solids. You come to another important point here, you see. That solid and space are in a secret conspiracy with each other. Actually, there's very little solid in the world. Most of what appears to be solid appears so by virtue of the speed at which it's jiggling. It's like an electric fan, which when put in rotation, the blades appear to form a solid disc. And this chair is solid for rather the same reasons. Well, you can't put your finger through it. It's moving too fast. But actually, whatever it is that's dancing in space is increasingly difficult to define. The more you think about energy, you see, and you can make a calculus of energy like you make a calculus of wiggles in the world, and you can say there are various waves or wavicles or particles of energy which we give all sorts of different names to, but the more we pursue it, the more it all seems to disappear. Like space, the more you try to think what it is, the more difficult it is. So in the same way, the more you try to say, now come on, let's sit down, what is this here? It's all right if you stop at a certain point and you say, well, now we know, that's practical. Let's not ask any more questions. Something, shut up. See? If you keep on asking questions, everything falls apart. They say in Zen, you do not try to drive a nail into the sky. Because that's the beauty of space, you see. It has there's nothing in it to hang on. It hasn't a hook to put your hat on, somewhere in space. And yet, it hasn't got a floor to fall onto. See, if space had a concrete floor on the bottom, it'd be pretty dangerous stuff. But it doesn't. There's nowhere in space to collide with space. You can run into somebody or something else, yes, but not with space. Figure then on this. Work on this hypothesis, you see. It's only a hypothesis at the moment, nothing more. That space is you. Because you are equally inaccessible to inspection. When you look to find out who you are, somebody like a Zen master will interrupt you and say, excuse me, but who is it that wants to know? And who is it that's looking? Find out that. So you know you're chasing your own tail like a little dog. And you never catch up with it. There's all this, you see. So space is like you, only we turned in the ordinary way to think of ourselves. We make the gesture like this. See? I'm here. We go this way. I can feel this. I'm inside it. This is me. See? But always when you get a certain feeling about things, examine the opposite possibility. That you are this. Now we're going to look in due course at the neurology of this, but you do see that what you see outside you and feel outside you is the way you feel inside your skin. Since all the optical images, shapes and colors and everything are neurological states in the brain. So what appears to you as outside is the most intimate feeling you have of the inside of your head. As you know, it's difficult to feel the inside of your head unless you have a headache or a tumor or something. But in the ordinary way, the inside of your head is unconscious, and the surgeon can open up your skull and put instruments in the brain, and you won't feel them at all. Brain is very anesthetized. So in order to feel the brain, you have to look out there. See? And that's how it feels in the brain. So I'm just trying to give an indication of how to get the feeling of reciprocity. Of you, on the one hand, it's easy to see, as I said, you depend on the whole show. Now I want you to see the opposite and equal truth, that the whole show depends on you. So that you don't anymore put yourself down as this wretched little bacterium living on this obscure planet that revolves around a minor star on the outer fringes of one of the lesser galaxies. This is the great 19th century put-down of man. How nice to be all unimportant. Watch out for this. Watch out for the political consequences of everybody is equally inferior. The political consequences emerging and becoming cleared as day goes by. Barbarism is the answer to that. Untrammeled violence, police states, and shocking disregard for human existence, because they're only wretched little bacteria. See? Just get rid of a whole lot of them. Zip, burn them up. And this is not unrelated, you see, to this feeling of the individual as someone who doesn't matter at all, which can be the reaction against the philosophy of life in which an individual mattered too much in the wrong way. In the Christian tradition, we have made the individual matter too much in the wrong way. That is to say, you as an ego are infinitely precious. God has made each one of you separately, and each one of you as a separate ego will last forever. And therefore you're all important in the eyes of God. But you better know your place, baby, because you're subjects of the king. But on the other hand, the other way of looking at the individual as an incarnation of the divine, as God, him or it or herself, coming on at God everywhere. Did you realize how fascinating that is? That if you were God, wouldn't it be fascinating to see myriads to know yourself in terms of myriads of reproductions of yourself, all different. And really different. Like other people seem to be different from you. And they've got a secret in them. You don't know what they're going to do next. See? But they are alive. If I push you and you just go, bleh, see, it's a bit plastic. If you jump a little, I say, that's someone else. I don't know what she's going to do next. See, that's what I'm looking for. That's what we're all looking for in personal relationships. And that's, you see, you can imagine, if you simplify it. Here is a kind of ball of light, which is the divine being. But it's fascinating. It's fascinated with itself. And so in order to find out its own possibilities, you see, it puts another one out there. And they bounce together. Flip, there comes another, you see. They go all over the place. And so you get this idea of ever so many echoes of one sound, and they're all chattering back. But they're not just plain uniform, you see. Soon you introduce into this the element of differentiation, so that each one looks as different as possible from the other. But it's all one, because they can't be the sense of I am, I, without the sense of there is someone else, something else, there is other. I and other imply each other as much as solid implies space. Well, we'll have an intermission.
We can consider the pursuit of pleasure in two broad senses. One which might be called lower, and the other which might be called higher. Although I'm not very happy with that classification. There is the pursuit of material pleasure, an art very much neglected in this day and age, because it must be carefully distinguished from the pursuit of theoretical pleasure. The pursuit of material pleasure is an art requiring a difficult discipline, much devotion and much skill. And it ranges through all the activities of man: engineering, cookery, clothes, architecture, lovemaking, and the so-called fine arts, music, literature, painting, sculpture, and so forth. But we are living in a culture where the pursuit of material pleasure is, as I say, neglected in pursuit of a symbolic pleasure, which of course, like many religions, has its prayer mat. Because a monetary unit is, of course, useful in exactly the same way that inches and hours, days, months, pounds, grams, and other units of measure are useful. But nobody has yet made a claim to fame by collecting inches. I have more inches than you. Because it is not a matter of social agreement that the possession of inches represents the possession of wealth. It is a matter of social agreement, and this is the only validity for money having any value whatsoever, is that everybody agrees that the chips are worth so much. And money is exactly like poker chips, except there's an agreement between all of us that we will accept them in lieu of goods and services. But goods and services constitute real wealth. And we are living in a society where we eat the menu instead of the dinner, because we are more interested in accumulating the tokens of wealth than wealth. And this flows over from symbols such as money itself into many other dimensions of life, because we tend on the whole to confuse symbol with reality. The idea that this world that we see with our five senses is a material world is merely an idea. Materialism as a philosophy of nature, dialectical materialism, naturalistic materialism, is a point of view. It's a concept. It's very, very highly abstract notion. So equally is the notion that this world that we see with our five senses is basically mental or spiritual. That also is a concept. The actual world is neither spiritual nor material. There is no way of saying what it is, because it is, like mystical experience, ineffable. It cannot be effed or spoken, from the Greek phemi, to say. So that world which is neither spiritual nor material is the neglected world. Most people think of it as material, but it's very much overlooked. Symbols are substituted for it. That is to say, we have symbolic goods. People live in symbolic homes, drive symbolic automobiles, wear symbolic clothes, which are valued for what they cost rather than for their quality. And this is, of course, as I've insisted, perhaps ad nauseam, especially manifested in what we eat. Our standards of cooking are improving, thanks to Gourmet Magazine and a few redoubtable people on the radio like Julia Childs. But by and large, the food of even wealthy people is disgraceful. It is symbolized by bread, which is supposed to be our staff of life, and we eat nothing but a kind of consumable styrofoam, fortified with vitamins, and you can read the list of them on the wrapper as if it were medicine. Also, in the pursuit of pleasure in the form of the fine arts, we don't really enjoy it. An enormous number of reasonably affluent people who attend concerts and go to exhibitions of paintings go there because they think they're improving their minds. That in some way doing things like that is good for you. People go to church for the same reason. That's the last reason for going to church, because it's good for you. That is an absolutely morbid interest, because it distracts you from what is going on. If you listen to Bach because you think it's good for you, you're not listening. In order to listen to Bach, you have to swing with it. And then you forget all about whether it's good for you or not. In fact, it feels more like things that are bad for you. When you swing with Bach, it begins to feel like sex. And as everybody knows, that's terribly bad for you. So I'm not going to dwell at any very great length on the niceties and the disciplines of the pursuit of pleasure in that so-called lower sense. I only want to say in passing that if you don't have the realization that the pursuit of material pleasure requires a certain degree of asceticism, you won't be able to pursue any other or higher kind of pleasure. Because asceticism is not unpleasant. Asceticism is like an olive between wines. It cleanses the palate. And what's the matter with olives? It is like taking some sort of exercise, which can be very pleasurable indeed, provided you don't do it grimly. There is a dreadful exercise being used today called jogging, which has absolutely nothing to recommend it. Because to begin with, when I watch people jogging, they obviously show they don't know how to run. They're running mostly on their heels. And that jars the bones all the way through and upsets the vertebral discs and so on. And there's a certain grim determination about joggers. They tend to run in straight lines, which they believe to be the shortest distance between 2 points. A straight line is not the shortest distance between 2 points on Earth, because Earth is wiggly. It is not a flat surface, except by courtesy of bulldozers. and occasional freaks of nature. This world, as I keep repeating, is a fundamentally wiggly phenomenon. But wherever human beings have been around, you will see they have a passion for Euclideanism. Everything is ruled out in straight lines and put in boxes, and grid patterns of streets are laid across the surface of the earth. And that tells you human beings have been there. Why this passion for Euclidean order? Because Mr. Euclid had a very, very simple mind and tended to think in these rather uninteresting shapes instead of in curvaceous wiggles. Now, nobody would fall in love with a Euclidean woman. What we appreciate about women is their curvaceousness, their wiggliness. And wiggliness offends some people because they are not sure of it. They can't figure it out. You never know quite what it's going to do next. That's why people often don't like snakes, because a snake is the great symbol of wiggly vitality, of undulation, of waves. And all this world is fundamentally a system of wave vibrations. And if you cannot wave with it, if you are rigid, you will always be resisting life. So wiggliness, going with wiggliness, in other words, do you swing, is fundamental to the pleasure of life. But you see, where we think that order and getting things in order is getting them squared away. We're always saying, let's get it squared away. Let's get it straight. And so there are certain kinds of people who are called straights and squares who do not swing. And as a result of that, they are out of harmony with a wiggly universe. And their attitudes range from cookery at one end to religion at the other. Because a square religion is one that is too abstract, that resists the flow element of life. It wants a canal instead of a river. And it conceives heaven as a city rather than a rose garden. Paradise is a garden. And all the trouble began when people substituted the heavenly city for the paradise garden. When, in other words, popes began to be called urban and unbelievers were called pagan, because a paganus is a country dweller, a man of the wiggles, as distinct from a man of the streets. A liver under the sky instead of one who lives in a box. Because the box, you see, is the great symbol of classification. What box are you in? All words are labels on intellectual boxes. Is it animal? Is it vegetable? Is it mineral? 3 boxes. Is it solid or is it a gas? Is it Republican or is it Democrat? Is it capitalist or is it communist? Is it Christian or is it heathen? Is it male or is it female? All boxes. And so because we think in boxes, we live in boxes, all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And whereas certain kinds of fish live in beautiful shells, glorious spirally wiggles on them, and lovely colors. And but we tend to want everything straightened out, you see. And that rigidity is always in a fight with the surrounding fluidity. And so we are, as it were, landlubbers rather than men of the waves. And the British have always made a great thing about this because they've always associated freedom with the ocean. Who are so free as the sons of the waves, and Britons never, never, never shall be slaves because of this seamanship. Now, we think, you see, of the sea as fluid and the land as solid. And nothing could be further from the truth, as you've all experienced recently in Southern California. The earth is not very solid. It flows. Where I live, in Sausalito, we have along the waterfront a lot of land that has been reclaimed. And not so long ago, they built a marina quite close to us where they dredged out mud to make the marina, not realizing that land is liquid. Therefore, the land adjoining the water is sinking to fill up the hole made by excavating for the marina. People just don't think of things like that because they think of land as solid. And so in religion, we are seemingly looking for solids, for something upon which I can take my stand, for a firm foundation, for the rock of ages, or even, poor old Paul Tillich, for the ground of being.